friends of mine, you know, a lot of them I never knew their last name even, but it's like I'd see them 2, 3, 4 nights a week, all the time, you know, for years. It was like, hey, you know, it was great. It was just a great, you know, a group of people.
Right. So what we're really talking about is like this was kind of like a community for alienated kids, right? And
Anyone want to talk about that?
It was for alienated kids, but also it wasn't all kids at that time. I mean, you couldn't. A lot of the clubs were not all ages, so it wasn't necessarily all young people.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, I was like early 20s or something. So yeah.
You know, they didn't have that many.
Before it became like a lot of the OC super aggro guys, it was kind of all age people. Especially the Mask, that was definitely a whole other artsy crowd and different kind of people altogether than the really young kids that started coming up from OC and kind of kicking that thing off. But what I was going to say, what I liked about Ed's pictures, besides the band pictures, was that he was really into document. Speaking of the historical aspect, he would take pictures. One of my favorite pictures, I think it was a Civic Ed, where they made you take off all your gear and put it in the check room, like all of your spikes and your belts and everything. And it was just a hilarious photo because you know, who would even think that was art? It was just ludicrous. He had to take all this stuff off anyway.
can you guys just because it's been so long, can you guys talk about like what the Sunset Strip club scene was like back in those? What you guys were encountered to was kind of that pay to play, you know, hair metal, pre-hair metal.
That was before
you know,
Yeah.
So, but anyone want to take a run at this and what you were fighting against? Because this was obviously there was those other bands, right? There was those kind of Van Halen kind of things that were going on that you were obviously all very much in opposition to. So it was just
Ted Nuisance.
Yeah. Ted Nuisance, I like that. Anyone?
I hung around the Runaways and the Quick and stuff like that, so it kind of evolved from a pop scene, but it wasn't like there wasn't other, you know, like the New York punk bands coming. But it was a weird mix because nobody knew what to do with the punk stuff, so there would be the earliest days like Wolfgang, does anybody remember them, or Van Halen opened for bands. I'd just be like, these guys are terrible, they'll never make it, they're awful. And so it wasn't always necessarily even a whole punk marquee, but I mean, you knew when the hardcore bands were coming because the street would be closed off and the cops were here, and the Starwood was the same thing. I mean, it was like, yeah, it had a really heavy, bad vibe to it. It wasn't like a fun thing.
You know, they talk about the Sunset Strip. There wasn't really very many clubs that booked punk. I mean, there was a Whiskey and what else?
Got shut down early on.
There was a Starwood, but that wasn't on the Sunset Strip.
Right.
Yeah, can you guys talk about the clubs where this stuff was going on? You know, you mentioned a lot of them, but like the Fleetwood to the Cuckoo's Nest to all that. It's a whole different kind of scene that we're talking about.
Well, you can talk, Tony, but
No, that's right.
no, he doesn't want to talk. The cops kept busting things over and over and over again, so you just had to go to these far-flung venues, like one of the main shows for oh my God, American, you know, the Slash movie. The Decline was at the Fleetwood, and that was like one of the worst vibes I've ever been to at a show. Like I walked in, within 5 minutes, somebody had blown up the toilets, like the men's bathrooms with M80s. They were trying to kill Penelope. She's on a ladder trying to film people. And then there's the Fear show where that woman and leaving or beating the crap out of each other. It was like it was an amazing show, but it was also terrifying. And so luckily I had friends that I would just kind of have a circle, you know, to protect me from being killed at all those shows. So, but anyway, as these venues wouldn't let punk bands play, there was the Polish Hall. They just keep moving around. Myron's Ballroom. There wasn't regular venues because once the cops discovered that people were going to Florentine Gardens, they just shut it down.
The Hong Kong was on my favorite.
Hong Kong was the best.
Yeah, talk about that because you're photographing in these places too.
And you got the cops, and you got all, you know, because you're taking great pictures.
Yeah, I was at the Polish Auditorium when that was turned into a riot. You know, one of the first clubs I went to was Hong Kong Cafe to see shows. It was probably like, it was just in 78 or early 79 when they opened. And like I said, people said, "Are you into new wave?" And I'd say, "Fuck no, I like punk rock." And the people would it's like they shouldn't even be in the same sentence ever. It's like, you know, they're just totally different worlds, and it has nothing to do with one another. One's like silly pop, and the other one's something.
That's because people went to, like, Madame Wong's got all this press and the local news and talk about Madame Wong's, and it was all like just totally normal bands and like pop bands because nobody wanted to be known as punk because it was so bad. So, but the Hong Kong had the real, like, Red Cross, and I don't know, everybody played there.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to ask Tony about this, because you obviously dealt with this with your band too. It's like, do we go pop? Do we stay true to our thing? I mean, because back then it was like, yeah, we're on the radio. Let's keep going that direction. Maybe we'll change the name. Maybe we'll take the F word out of the song.
And you were dealing with that a lot.
Yeah, we would have fist fights over it.
That's with Lisa, right?
That was just me.
Yeah, Lisa was always very, very accommodating. She didn't interfere at all. When we, however, whatever, except when I sprayed the fire extinguisher all over the basketball court, that was a problem. But other than that, everything seemed to be okay. Lyrically and sonically, she just let us go in and do our thing. So and Tom, who Lisa introduced us to, was a great engineer. He did a really fabulous job, and he just captured what we were doing. We didn't have any. I don't know how to explain it, but we didn't have this idea that we were playing pop or not playing pop. We listened to Cheap Trick records. We liked Cheap Trick a lot. We all liked the Beatles a lot. No, we really, but we really did. We as a band, we liked the Beatles. We liked the Kinks. We liked '60s music. We loved surf music. We were from Orange County. We did listen to Dick Dale. We liked surf music. So there was no we had the Agnes grandfather was a mariachi musician, so we had music around us, and we weren't really pigeonholed into having to do something specific. We borrowed the speed from the middle class. All we did was took these octaves and these harmonies that some of us had learned in church choir, and for real, and applied it to the music that we really wanted to play. And we were all from different backgrounds. We were spread out. I lived 15 miles from the rest of those guys, so even the way that we lived our lives was very, very different. And so all that influenced the way that we played music. And there was no blueprint for us to follow, so we just did what we felt like doing.
That's good.
Can I mention something? When you first had Frontier, it was out on San Fernando Road, and you were in the old building with Bomb.
Yeah, they were just letting me work in the Bomb offices.
Yeah, in the corner. And
Yes.
It's like, Greg Shaw doesn't get mentioned very often, and he was like major.
Oh,
to
yeah,
the LA
I
punk scene.
always
Greg
make sure I
Shaw.
mention Greg Shaw.
Yeah, but it's like, he wasn't tonight
Yeah.
yet. But he was a huge part of the LA music.
I usually wasn't going to interrupt, but you look
Oh,
so
yeah.
excited to talk.
I just wanted to say that, I interviewed Greg Shaw back in 2001, and he gave so much credit to Lisa for really finding the OC bands and bringing them to light in LA.
In
And
fact,
he
I even
really gave
offered
them
them to
credit.
Greg before I put them out because I didn't have any money anyway. And he was like, I don't get it. He was just like, I'm glad you're doing it, but I don't get it. And I was like, thank God.
Yeah, Greg Ginn, I guess, talks about how he was supposed to start on Bomb Records, or Black Flag was supposed to be on Bomb, so. Yeah, Greg Shaw, super important figure in all of this. Another person I was going to talk about was Darby Crash. Because Darby Crash, is really kind of the guy who made it okay for these bands to kind of come from the suburbs, was no longer just Hollywood. And I was just wondering if, he really helped spread this thing. And I just was wondering if any of you, if you agree with me.
I'm not going to say anything bad about the Dead, but I used to see him at glam shows and stuff. We used to be standing in line at the Odyssey to go see the Quick and stuff. Yeah, he loved David Bowie, so I would see him and Pat Smear back in the day. For those of you that are too young, the Germs I thought they were terrible. Terrible. The album is amazing, but I've seen so many, it was funny because he was rolling around the floor in glass, but other than that, not good.
They taped the mic to his hand and it declined, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every show, even the very last show that they did was he didn't stand up at all, like he was just laying up, rolling around, so enjoy. But the record's still, the best record.
Yeah, it's a very strong record, very strong recording, and I did see a couple of Germ shows that I would hold up to anybody. Like when they were on, the Germs were definitely on.
I missed those.
I think Darby Crash was afraid of what was. I think he was a bit intimidated by what we were bringing in, and I don't think he knew where he fit in that context. This has been relayed to me by Rick Elric, and I have no reason to doubt that at all. His feeling was, and I knew Darby, and he was always very polite with me, but I do believe that he didn't know what we were bringing in. I mean, he was unchained, but we were completely off the hook, and I don't think he knew what to make of any of it. It was chaos, absolutely, and when it got out of control, as it did at the Fleetwood or at the Great Gatsby, which was right down just a few blocks away from there, these clubs were not prepared to handle it at all, and the vibe was really, really negative, and it was really, really bad. It was not a comfortable place to be.
Want to say anything about that, Edward?
Hey.
Because you just captured so much of this stuff, because you're trying to.
Did.
I wouldn't go down in a pit for $1,000 nowadays. Back then, everybody knew even if they didn't know who I was, they knew I belonged there. Yeah.
Another guy I think had a lot to do with this, who kind of doesn't get a lot of credit, is Gary Tovar. Started Golden Voice, named Golden Voice for the brand of Thai weed he was smuggling. So all of a sudden you have your Golden Voice concerts. That's where the name came from. Anybody want to talk about him? Super important character in the rise of all this. Because all of a sudden it wasn't just in the clubs. It was like at the Olympic, and it was a spectacle. It was no longer just that.
That wasn't really my world, the touring thing.
Yeah, I met Gary well after about 1986. So by then he had already done a number of shows at the Olympic. I was in the parking lot at those shows, but I was no longer allowed in the building. So.
I don't
You
blame
were a
them.
bad boy.
I was, but I do like Gary very much, and he did a lot for music in our city. So that needs to be recognized as well.
Yeah, I think it's just like a super important character who really went out on a limb, who made it possible for this shit to go on. And I mean this shit to go on. I was going to ask everybody this question, but what do you apply from the old days? This kind of punk rock ethic and the artistic vision that you kind of picked up from that. Like, what have you maintained from it, and I guess what have you shed from it too? Like, in other words, we all grow up and move on. So I think it's like again, I'm talking about like a way of life that we all kind of like fell into. Anybody?
More an attitude.
I'm just saying it was like. So much more than just music, right? We were all we gave our lives to this thing,
I'm just surprised after, last year was Frontier's 30th anniversary. I'm just surprised people still care about it, honestly, because I didn't think any long-term thing. It's just,
Didn't back then.
we just put a record out and just, it's like, the Allisons are awesome. Put a record out, didn't think people would, even 5 years later, who knew somebody would buy it, or that it would be a hot topic, or... I'd see kids in Universal City walking around in an adolescent shirt. It's like, it's just the weirdest thing in the world. But what did I shed?
It's weird.
I don't know.
Well, that's
Still don't go in the pit and have people protecting me from boots in the head. I go to the Warped Fest, Warped or whatever, and still standing in the back, not getting killed by people. Just some things never change.
How about for you, Tony? Because it's like you've seen this whole thing come and go, and now it's in the revival stage.
What was the question?
Well, just like you apply from the because you obviously have a different approach than you did 30 years ago, and now you're playing to kids who weren't even born when
Well,
these
that's
things
really
came out.
Well, for them, it's their music, so it's really exciting, to be part of that. I enjoy the audiences now, the kids that come to the shows, because they're in a place that's very, very uncomfortable and very, very awkward, and I think that people our age forget that, and I don't, because it's in my face all the time, but I think that a lot of people do. you know, I'm really happy to be sitting here with these people. I've known all of these guys forever. I was really proud of you, and I saw him do one of his first talks in this kind of a forum, and his confidence is better than mine. So I was very impressed. But I've known Ed forever. Ed's always been, you know, Ed's always been there for me. And what I learned from people like Ed and from Lisa is that no matter how bad a person fucks up, and believe me, we did. That there was always redemption, and there was always a possibility to work things out. It wasn't like, you know, that you, if I angered or upset somebody or did something totally inappropriate and unpredictable, they wouldn't ostracize me for it. I'd get a scolding, or I'd get a talking to, but it wasn't like it was the end of the world. And I walked away with that. I mean, that's something that I use in my life every day. So, you know, I'm grateful to these people. They were my mentors. I had no idea at the time.
How old were you when I met you?
15 or 16.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you know, I was a baby.
Yeah, knowing what, 2/3,
Yeah.
3/4 of your life already?
Yeah. What do you remember about these first adolescence shows?
Oh, they were a lot of fun, real wild. Tony was skinnier than I was.
It's a time.
Yeah. I got a couple pictures where you looked like you weighed about 98 pounds.
I probably did. That, yeah.
You gotta find those ones where they took with a cinder block wall with you guys. Remember those color ones?
Yes.
You gotta find those.
Yes.
You know, when we were, you know, younger, when we were kids, we weren't not listening to music from 30 years ago. I mean, we weren't listening to, like, Frank Sinatra or something, you know, before us. And,
I loved Elvis Presley always. I still do.
okay.
Really?
I guess what my question was why do you think, you know, this is a universal with kids today? You know, I mean, I kind of feel like it's the only music that didn't sell out. That's my real take on this. You know, these, you could say what you want to. Maybe they didn't have the opportunity to sell out. But it's like the only music you could trust.
It was the bands after. It was all the people that, as you mentioned, that came way further down the line that made all the money, which is sad. You know,
Yeah,
Fall Out Boy and Offspring, and even though they started out indie or whatever, and Green Day.
Did
If
the
only
Travis
Tony
do the
made the
same?
cash
You know, on the
that.
cover of Rolling Stone, it say the day that punk broke with Green
Yeah,
Day.
yeah. I know. And you're just like, really?
Yeah. That's
But I'm not bitter. I'm fine with it.
What was the question? Sometimes the discussion goes sideways, so I'm having trouble following it. So, just to some degree, I have no complaints. You know, the bands that we went to see and the bands that we loved were great bands, and I still listen to all the music that I grew up listening to. I still listen to all the punk bands I listened to. I loved all the bands that came before us. I loved the Germs. I loved the Controllers. I loved the Bags. I loved the Avengers. I loved the Alley Cats. I loved all those bands. I loved all those bands. I loved the Flesh Eaters.
Too, right?
I loved UXA. Tooth and Nail was one of the greatest records that I had ever heard up to that point in my life, and it still holds up to a lot of the stuff that's come since. So these are great records. They still are great records. And the only difference between listening to them now and listening to them then is that they're the soundtrack of my life right now. I don't live in the past, so whatever I'm doing right now, they're still the soundtrack. I still love these records, and it's as if they were recorded just for me to listen to, just to be part of my life. So I think that's what this music's all about.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's totally true. That's awesome. You know, back in the day, you know, with all the indie labels, you know, I think all of us, and especially the bands, hated the music business, hated the major labels, wanted to destroy the whole network. And now that that's happened, I just want to know, is that a good thing? I mean, maybe from the indie label perspective, you may have something to say, Lisa.
You know, because you were constantly battling them.
Once again, not bitter, but I never really had a major label deal. But I almost felt kind of sad because I think there's only 3 or 4 left at the moment, and they're getting smaller all the time. But yeah, they dug their own grave. They got greedy with CDs. If we had only just stuck to vinyl, we, there might still be a music business. But I don't know. You have to remember that the Ramones never put out a record on an indie label, or the original records. The Clash never did. The Pistols never did. So I can't hate everything they did. A lot of my favorite bands were on majors, but I never had the opportunity. They never gave me a hand up or a help out or anything, like the whole time. So, well, they got what they deserve. See?
And so it goes.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, the punk bands had started this dialogue of the word DIY. And in retrospect, they really weren't DIY bands like you're talking about. Sex Pistols were on Warner Brothers and had major managers. It was like the lowest rung of Tin Pan Alley or something like that. So I think really what we're talking about is the power of a movement, power of a music. The fact that people still buy your records, the fact that people still come see the Adolescents, the fact that people still interested in the photos Edward is taking. That's deep. That's more than music.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
you stopped photographing at a certain point? Is it because you lost the scene changed, you changed? How would you describe that, Edward?
I haven't really stopped. I'm just not pursuing it much.
Right, with bands that you don't really do live band.
Oh no, I stopped. I basically stopped doing live stuff at the end of '83 when I stopped going to punk shows primarily. I'd go out and see my friends' bands every once in a while and stuff, but I was not living out there anymore. I just stopped it. I wanted to attempt to make a living doing photography, which the punk scene wasn't paying me anything. And
Ed shot my wedding.
yeah, it drove up in my hearse too.
Our whole family started genuflecting right away. It was a scene. It was really, really good time, though. Ed's an amazing photographer, so as you can imagine, our wedding pictures are among the most incredible, pictures anyone could ever have. It was the greatest gift that, for a marriage that's still strong.
Hey.
Yeah.
I got caught into photographing 3 weddings, and yours was the last.
Yeah.
People, if they started to open their mouth, it's like, no. I could just tell, and it was like, no, I'm not doing it. That's funny. I always thought I wouldn't photograph babies or sunsets or weddings.
We told them we wouldn't get married unless he did it. So.
Yeah, neither thing. I've been doing photography for 33 years, and I've never advertised. I don't solicit work, and my phone number's unpublished. And it's just all word of mouth, like a lot of the records you sold and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was really, you notice the people I invited to come do this today. These are the people who are really in the trenches, who really made the shit happen.
We're still in the trenches.
Yeah, seriously.
That's 6 feet deep.
There's a few other photographers who did stuff back in the day who were better self-promoters, but, Edward's the one, who did the real deal,
He's my
doing
favorite.
that stuff. So,
Always been my favorite photographer.
Yeah.
Always been. And this is a really great story. We were at Warped Tour, and a girl had come up, and I was talking to Ed, and she said, can I take a picture with you? And I said, sure, that'd be fine. And she goes, will you take it? And she handed the camera to Ed. And so snapped it off. And this girl had no idea.
Did I know how to use it?
She said, you know what to do?
I usually don't.
Yeah, it was one of those and he did, he took the picture, and she walked away, and I looked at Ed and I go, she has no idea. She has no idea who just took that picture. And, to me, something like that's worth $1 billion. That's the respect I have for his art. So.
There's just one last question that I had. I want to thank all my ADD punk rock friends for coming out and sitting here and not leaving. So it really means a lot. And I said we're going to be signing books later, and hopefully I could even talk some of these guys to put their John Doe or Jane Doe on that. I guess the final question I really had was, I'm sitting here saying, I'm standing here boldly saying LA hardcore really changed the music scene. I guess what I'm saying is, am I right about that? I mean, did this act, is the music scene different? Is it the same? Does it just have new trappings? Is it just the same shit with a different package? I mean, I guess that's really my question. Like, we sit here and talk about that hardcore did change the playing field, but I'm just I guess I'm wondering if I'm right about that.
I still think the greatest band in the world is playing in a garage somewhere to about 8 kids that go to high school with them. And they may or may not make a record, but right now they're the greatest band in the world. So yeah, nothing's changed really. There's always going to be great bands. It's just whether or not people are going to hear them. I do, I have to say that regarding your book, prior to this, there really wasn't any documentation of this, of what was going on from 1978 until about 1984. There are a plethora of books now, but there weren't any before. And your book was, regardless of, and there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like the way that Steve goes about directing his book. But the bottom line is, before Steve did it, nobody did. And there was there were a couple of picture books, but there was never anything from the perspective of a music fan. It was always from the perspective of somebody who was either a journalist or somebody that was that was an artist, that was or a photographer that was working working within that infrastructure of music. This guy was writing for his own magazine. He had started his own magazine, and he came into it specifically to look at a style of music that some of us still don't even acknowledge as really being a music form. I don't. I never have used that as a way to describe the music that I play. He does, but we don't have to agree on that. What I do appreciate is that there was something going on. There was a music going on that was really, really important. And your Toxic Reasons and your Zero Boys and your Husker Do's and even your Replacements came out of this. And without recognizing that, it would still be bits and pieces out there, but there would be no definitive handbook to where a person can pull it out and go, all right, I'm kind of curious about this band. I'm going to go and see if I can find this. And if it wasn't for Steve's book, that wouldn't have happened. So, way to go.
Thank you so much. It means a lot. And thank you so much to Edward Culver, Tony Cadena, Lisa Fancher. Thank you all for coming out. Please get a book. Thank you. Take care.